Animal Crossing is a series of games where you live in a small town and socialize with animals and do everyday menial tasks. And it's fucking awesome. The first game in the series released originally as a Nintendo 64 game exclusively in Japan in 2001, but it was later enhanced and released worldwide on the GameCube a year or so later. The beginning of the game starts with a human character starting a new life in a faraway town for the very first time, and with little to no money, they're barely able to pay for a down payment for a cheap house. With little to nothing, the human character is offered a part-time job to work in Tom Nook's store to help pay off their loan. But after about an hour or so, he runs out of tasks and leaves the human character off to their own devices. From this point on, Animal Crossing becomes an open-ended life simulation game where the human character can do whatever they want at their own pace with no end in sight. With the complete freedom to do anything, any semblance of structure is thrown out the window. You can talk to villagers and see how their day is going and help them out to get items, and you can buy a shovel and dig up fossils and send them off in the mail to get them identified and then donate them to the museum. You can make money by collecting fruit from fruit trees to sell the fruit at Tom Nook's store to use that money to buy furniture from Tom Nook's store to put it in your house, and you can also pay off your home loan to Tom Nook if you want to renovate your home and be a responsible person who pays the bills. But you don't have to do that. There's no time limit. You'll never get evicted, so it doesn't matter. So fuck it. Go get a fishing rod and fish in the river and sell the fish you get, and don't pay off your loan and instead buy cool shit to put in your house. But you can also donate the fish to the museum too, and then you can see all the fish you caught. And if there's a holiday, the mayor of the town will give you some dumb shit that you can put in your house, and the homeowners association that breaks inside your room every night will give you more points based off the rarity of the items in your house and send you spam mail about all the points you have every single day for the rest of your life. And you can also send letters to other villagers too if you want to be super nice, but they'll never understand what you wrote and then you'll never do it again. But in the meantime, you can design your own clothes patterns and make your own clothes so you can look cool, or you can just look them up on GameFAQs because you're lazy. And you can take all the items at the stinky dump and sell it for money because it's free. And you can also shake trees in town to find money sometimes, but then sometimes bees will come out of the trees to sting you, but you can catch the bees with a bug net and donate them to the museum too, and or sell it at Tom Nook's store. And sometimes you can find furniture in the trees and put it in your house. It's the fucking hypest shit. Now, after hearing this, some people may believe that Animal Crossing is a waste of time because you're doing meaningless tasks just for the sake of doing them. And yes, that is true, but that's also kind of missing the point. The reason Animal Crossing is fun is because you can calm down and relax while you find joy in the more mundane experiences of life. It provides a sort of therapeutic experience, like going on a morning walk or watching the waves at the beach or fishing on a lake or looking at the stars. These sort of activities are fundamentally boring, but they're also things that people do because they like doing them. And if you like doing something that makes you happy, it makes that otherwise pointless activity worth doing. Believe it or not, video games as a medium are a waste of time. Did you guys know that? I mean, why watch a movie when you just sit there and do nothing? Why eat healthy food and work out if you're just gonna die anyways? Why enjoy anything? You know what? How about this? Since life is pointless and you're going to die anyways, how about you just fucking kill yourself? Just get a shotgun and blow your brains out. Just die. Fuck it. Get it over with. Pull the fucking trigger. Oh, you're not gonna do it. You're not gonna do it, you fucking pussy, okay? So shut the fuck up and play some goddamn video games. Oh wow, here's a video game right here, and it's super fun. You can catch butterflies and plant flowers. No game has ever done this before. You can talk to a dog on the weekends and he'll play you a song on his guitar. It is the greatest game ever made. Now, with all that said, the reason why I love Animal Crossing is while it's a relatively boring life sim on a surface, it somehow also features incredible video game mechanics. The most unique aspect of Animal Crossing is that time passes in real time by syncing itself with the system clock on the GameCube. The stores in-game all open and close at certain hours, the entire game cycles through the 4 seasons, and it even features an in-game calendar which places unique activities all throughout the year, like seasonal activities and even some traditional holidays. Animal Crossing was famously marketed as a game that continues existing even when you're not playing it, and during the time, there really wasn't anything else like it. At any time of the day, you can load up the game and explore the town and stumble upon some new thing you haven't seen before. Sometimes there's an event happening, sometimes there's a new kind of insect insect or fish that you can catch. A unique villager will sometimes visit the town for a day. Sometimes there's a cool thing for sale in Tom Nook's store. There's always something to keep you interested for the day, and things are always happening later down the road that you can look forward to. Now, if this was all Animal Crossing did, it would still be a relatively interesting game to play, but surprisingly, it gets even more complex as you dive more into it. Not only is the town you live in randomly generated, but player characters also have 8 different variations you unknowingly create yourself, and the game features over 200 unique villagers which can move into your town at any time. The villagers feature a variety of different species, appearances, personality traits, and also have a surprisingly vast amount of dialogue with their own little stupid catchphrases. There's also over 1,000 unique items you can collect throughout the game, featuring unique furniture, wallpaper, rugs, clothing, and all sorts of stuff, which allows for an insane amount of customization for decorating your home. You can also collect music tracks for your home by talking to KK Slider on Saturday nights, with each music track representing basically every music genre you can think of. And there's 40 different species of fish and insects you can catch in town, which spawn at different times throughout the day at certain locations, as well as only spawning during certain months throughout the year. I mean, there's so many cool aspects to Animal Crossing that a lot of people just didn't really experience because they didn't know what the game was. After all, the marketing during the time was so bizarre that it didn't really explain what the game was, and since it was a life sim, it kind of just looked boring. But it honestly isn't. The game is charming as hell and has tons of fun interactions you can experience with other characters. Tom Nook himself is a greedy, money-hungry capitalist, but he's also kind of benevolent for giving the player a home despite being homeless and having no money. It's a very hilarious contrast that paints him as a sort of exploitive yet generous person, but only due to the absolute horrible standards we place on our society in real life. As the player continues to spend more money, he'll eventually expand his business by renovating his shop into a fancy, full-fledged 2-story department store and resorts to child labor to keep his business afloat. And no, apparently Timmy and Tommy are not his kids or related to him in any way. They are literally just some random kids he hires because he's a fucking asshole. Also, to go on a bit of a tangent because I know I'll have to address this, but his name is pronounced Tom Nook and not Tom Nook. The game does not have voice acting, so you have no in-game proof either way, so suck my dick. You got these fucking nerds out here saying, oh, his store is called Nook's Cranny, and since it's a play on the words Nook and Cranny, its name is actually pronounced Tom Nook according to the Oxford Dictionary. But listen, you dummy, his store is actually pronounced Nook's Cranny, which is just a play on the words Nook and Cranny because it's Tom Nook's Cranny. That's why the store is called Nook's Cranny. Fucking Nookingtons, bro, come on. Also, Tom Nook is a fucking tanuki. Tom Nook, tanuki, it makes way more sense. Listen, there's absolutely no possible way I was slightly illiterate when I played this game as a 7-year-old, okay? His name is Tom Nook, okay? Fuck you guys! Blathers is another fantastic character who runs the museum, and it's pretty funny because since he's a nocturnal owl, it means that players have to constantly wake him up during the day. Every time you donate an item, he'll also straight up give you an entire lecture about it, and again, there's a surprisingly vast amount of dialogue, so much so that most players probably don't even give a shit, but he'll explain every minute detail about this fossil you just donated, and you better pay attention and fucking learn something. The Able sisters are also a fan favorite. Mabel's the main person who runs the shop and interacts with all the customers, but Sable quietly works in the corner and never says anything. Now, what's really cool is that if you keep trying to talk to Sable, she'll eventually open up to you over the course of a couple of weeks and eventually become your friend, and you can discover some pretty crazy in-depth Animal Crossing backstory. Okay, fuck Dark Souls, we got Animal Crossing lore! I mean, there's so many cool characters. You got Red, who runs a black market, who constantly tries to scam you with forged paintings, but he's also got all the super dank furniture, so you keep going back and buying stuff regardless. Pelly works at the post office and she's super sweet, but Phyllis works the night shift and she's a total bitch and just wants you to leave. You can ride a boat with a turtle and he'll sing you sea shanties, just spitting bangers left and right. And one of the best characters in the game by far is Mr. Rossetti, whose entire purpose is to be a giant asshole. If you ever turn off the game without saving, you'll get confronted by this character in front of your house the next time you boot up your save file, and his only purpose is to yell at you for cheating. And if you continue to do it in an attempt to manipulate the time mechanics, he'll eventually become more and more aggressive until he's eventually just full-blown screaming at you. It's one of the most meta things I've ever seen in a video game that is also fucking hilarious. Which is incredible because they put in so much work for this character that most players might never even come across. You see, the secrets and hidden mechanics you can discover in Animal Crossing are insane. For example, every day a random rock in town will be a money rock, and if you randomly decide to hit it, it'll release a bag of bells and will continue to pour out money for a certain amount of time. There's also a glowing spot that randomly appears in town once a day that you can dig up to attain bells. Now, what's special about the glowing spot is that by burying bells in the glowing spot location, you can obtain the ability to plant a money tree. The way money trees work is that depending on the amount of money you bury, you're more or less likely to have the money tree grow, which will yield different profits depending on the amount of bells you bury. Which sounds extremely overpowered at a first glance, but as hardcore Animal Crossing fans discovered, the profit ratio of the money trees was so bad that it was essentially a massive gamble to make even a measly profit. Now, what's more cool is that if you take your shovel and bury another shovel into the glowing spot, you will be able to plant a golden tree, which will give you a golden shovel. The benefit of the golden shovel is that it allows you to randomly dig up money whenever you dig a hole, which is pretty sick. There's also golden variations of all the other tools. The golden net can be obtained by catching every bug in the game, and it has a larger catch radius. The golden fishing rod can be attained by catching every fish in the game, and it's able to attract fish more easily. And the golden axe has infinite durability and is obtained by maintaining a perfect town rating for 15 days straight. Obtaining the status for a perfect town rating is notoriously difficult because the game utilizes a hidden score system which determines your town rating. You can increase your town rating by planting more flowers, pulling weeds, picking up trash, and planting trees in barren areas and cutting down trees in cluttered areas. And figuring out the perfect balance to obtaining this perfect town rating is by far the hardest thing to do in the entire game. There's also a special villager you can buy turnips from every Sunday morning, which you can resell at Tom Nook's store at fluctuating prices and essentially gamble your money away to make a profit through the stock market. Because turnips are a stock, it's literally a stock market. And the price of turnips will actually trend to certain patterns that you can discover where you can predict when you should sell your turnip stocks to maximize your profits. Now, as someone who played this game as a stupid kid, I thought, wow, let's use time travel to cheat the system and make a bunch of money. Because, of course I did. But as I soon discovered, the game actually takes this into consideration because if you even attempt to cheat the system by changing the in-game clock, the turnips will eventually go rotten and you will lose your entire initial investment. And then Mr. Rossetti will yell at you and call you a bitch. There's also an entire hidden luck system throughout the game which you can unknowingly manipulate. You can get your fortunes read by Katrina, which will obviously temporarily affect your hidden luck stat, but you can also permanently increase your luck stat by utilizing feng shui. Players can inject Chinese energy into their homes by positioning objects in certain corners of your room, which increases your chances of coming across rare items or increasing the chances of finding money or increasing their overall luck stat, which does something sometimes. And there's also a completely random list of items which instantly increase your luck stat for some reason. Like, it's fucking crazy. Animal Crossing also utilized all the GameCube tech to its fullest potential. You can hook up your Game Boy Advance to your GameCube and unlock the ability to travel to an island, and there's like a whole mini game you can play on your Game Boy Advance that you can use to unlock items and money. You can scan cards with the e-reader to get items, and you can even travel to other players' towns by plugging in their memory card into the second slot of your GameCube. The game also features collectible NES games you can place in your house, which you can actually play in-game, like actual legit NES ROMs you can find as in-game items. You can play Punch-Out, Excite-Bike, Balloon Fight, Wario Woods, tons of other stuff, and if you get an action replay and cheat, you can even get Zelda 1, Mario Bros, Super Mario Bros, and Ice Climbers. It's fucking awesome. I legit played through the entirety of multiple NES games through Animal Crossing on the GameCube. Like, this shit was so fucking cool back in the day. I mean, when you look back in time in this pre-YouTube era where made-up video game rumors were rampant amongst playgrounds and internet forums, what was crazy was that like 99% of the stuff talked about in Animal Crossing was fucking true. It was all in there. Like, someone would be like, dude, there's an invisible ghost that wanders around town at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the only way to find them is to walk through them and they'll give you a super rare item. It's like freaking crazy. And it's like, oh yeah, I bet you can find Mew underneath the truck. Like, shut the fuck up. fuck you. But then you walk around at 2 a.m. and it was real. It's like, what? Then it's like, dude, you can go inside the lighthouse. There's a hidden door behind the lighthouse that you can't see, but there's a lock on it, and you can randomly talk to Tortimer and unlock it on an unmarked calendar day. And it's like, dude, shut the fuck up. That's the most made up bullshit in the world. You can't do that. But then, oh wait, never mind. Apparently you can do that. Like, how did people figure this out? Anyways, the original Animal Crossing holds an incredible place in my heart. It's super nostalgic, the music is perfect, the characters are all super charming, its gameplay is mechanically really interesting, and it's everything I love about Nintendo games all packaged into one experience. Animal Crossing is awesome, it's one of the best games ever made, I fucking love it. So now it's 2005, and Nintendo released a sequel to Animal Crossing on the Nintendo DS called Animal Crossing Wild World, and this game was amazing. The human guy characters no longer had goblin horns coming out of their heads. The girl characters weren't wearing the fucking Harry Potter wizard hats. They had actual hair. You could wear hats and wear accessories. It was the hypest shit. They essentially took the original game and just made it better with more stuff. More gameplay mechanics, more house upgrades, more furniture, more rugs, wallpaper, clothes, bugs, fish, fossils, fucking everything. It has everything. One of the biggest changes with Wild World was the new camera system. Unlike the first game that had a sort of Legend of Zelda top-down view where you transition screens between acres, Wild World continuously scrolls and the town warps around you on this sort of rolling log. Overall, I really like the style of the top-down view from the first game and was initially put off by this new approach. But the new camera system does work well with the DS hardware and has its own benefits. It allows you to see buildings and villagers off in the horizon, you can view the sky in the upper screen, and it allowed you to see more of the town on the incredibly small DS screen. You could also connect to other local DSs to travel to other people's towns and play with them at the same time, as well as doing it through Wi-Fi, which was arguably one of the best new features of the game. Now, the only downside of the multiplayer aspect of this game is that if you shared towns with another player, you would essentially become roommates and share one house together, whereas the original game allowed 4 players to each have their own individual houses, which was obviously much better. Now, despite this technical limitation, it didn't really matter. The more personal experience of having it on a handheld as opposed to a home console meant that you didn't have to share your system with someone else, giving your game file and your town the ownership you deserve. And since the game features real-time multiplayer with other players, there's almost little to no incentive to share a town with someone else when the biggest feature of the game is playing with other people. Wild World also brought some really interesting gameplay mechanics to the series. New notable changes were the new slingshot tool, which you could use to shoot down balloons out of the sky and Gulliver in a fucking UFO, and the watering can, which can be used to water flowers and prevent them from wilting, as well as incentivizing the creation of hybrid flowers, which was a massive new mechanic for the series. By planting 2 of the same flowers in a group, it increases the chances of 2 flowers next to each other to spawn a different colored variation of the same flower the following day. Depending on the color of the 2 flowers, they will carry over their genetic information to the new hybrid flower, which will occasionally result in uniquely colored variants of flowers you can't buy at Tom Nook's store. There's black, blue, orange, pink, purple, and the golden watering can also gave you the benefit of turning black roses into gold roses. The museum also received a major overhaul. A major improvement to the series was that Blathers could now inspect fossils without having to send them through the mail, which was much more efficient and saved players a shit ton of time. An observatory was added to the second floor where Celeste will allow you to stargaze and create constellations in the sky, and a cafe was added on the first floor where KK Slider will play songs on Saturday nights. And if you buy coffee from the Brewster, he'll start talking to you and you'll get some dank Animal Crossing backstory, okay? Fuck this stupid Dark Souls shit. No one gives a fuck about the furtive pygmy. Animal Crossing lore is way cooler. There's also a new beauty salon added to Tom Nook's store after he upgrades his store to Nookington's. And yes, that is the correct way to pronounce it. In classic Animal Crossing fashion, you can change your hairstyle by answering a couple of questions, and then Harriet will change the style and color of your hair depending on your answers, which usually resulted in some awful looking pink monstrosity where I would eventually just look up the answers to pick in order to actually make my hair fair look the way I wanted it to. A lot of the services and shops have also been consolidated in a much more efficient manner. Tom Nook's shop and the Able Sisters sit next to each other on the same acre to make a little shopping area, where the Able Sisters now exclusively sell clothing and accessories alongside their usual custom patterns. The Town Hall is a new building that combines the post office, dump, and wishing well into one building, where special events occur outside in the main plaza. And there's a town gate that combines the services of the train station and the police station, which is mainly used for multiplayer. Wild World also streamlined the game by allowing players to save their game by just pressing start and quitting whenever they wanted to, which is by far the best feature. In the previous game, the only way to save was to talk to your gyroid at your house, but Wild World made saving such an easy task that Mr. Rossetti basically didn't even need to exist anymore. Now, while this game was like the hype as shit and I loved it, there was also some changes to the game that I personally didn't like as much as the original. First of all, the soundtrack wasn't as nearly as catchy. The first game's music featured a lot of goofy samples of cat noises, whistling, weird synths and stuff like that. It was so bouncy and happy and groovy and very chill. It nailed this beautiful mix of the colorful, goofy vibes of Animal Crossing. Whereas Wild World is still good, but I feel like the more organic sounding guitar strings and other instruments gets a little too repetitive. The towns also didn't have cliffs or any notable elevation changes, which visually made them a lot less interesting. Also, they got rid of the NES games and never brought it back again, because it was too cool. And now that Nintendo charges money for these things, they'll literally never do it again. Finally, another minor complaint is that Wild World removed a lot of the versions of the more traditional holidays like Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, and replaced it with like made-up bullshit holidays that no one cares about. Like, oh boy, it's time to celebrate Yay Day, where you tell villagers like shitty knock-knock jokes. Oh, it's La-di-da Day, ooh, zippity-doo-da Day, oh, like they fucking celebrate Kwanzaa. Like, dude, fucking black people don't even celebrate that shit. Like, what the fuck? Where's Jingle? We genocided these Native Americans to celebrate Thanksgiving, and now we can't even have our bastardized, whitewashed version of history in Animal Crossing. This is fucking bullshit. Okay, the Trail of Tears happened so I could get the Harvest Lamp in Animal Crossing, and now I can't do that. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. Still, despite this, Animal Crossing Wild World is a goddamn classic. It was an awesome sequel, and I played the absolute shit out of it. Unlike the next game in the series, Animal Crossing City Folk. Now, this game was released in 2008 on the Wii, and while it's still a really good game, it was also somewhat disappointing. Overall, what made Wild World a good sequel was that the amount of new features, items, and gameplay mechanics was astronomical, where City Folk doesn't add as much new content to the series. In fact, it basically adds nothing. It features nearly the same identical camera system as Wild World, it brought over the same exact mechanics of Wild World and barely added any new features of its own, and it even has the same identical soundtrack. There were some minor improvements to the older mechanics of Wild World, like obviously more fish and bugs and furniture and whatnot, but nothing substantial enough to really keep older players engaged. They brought back real holidays, you can now do pro designs and create more intricate patterns for your clothes, you could have multiple players live in separate houses in unique acres, they brought back the cliffs, which made the towns look a lot better, there were some minor town improvement projects, they added silver variants to all the tools alongside the gold variants, but despite all their best efforts, City Folk was basically like Animal Crossing Wild World Game of the Year Edition ported to the Wii with all the DLC. The most notable feature in City Folk was a city that you travel to by taking the bus, but from my personal experience, there really wasn't much of a reason to go there. All the best places like Tom Nook's shop, the Able Sisters, and the museum were all still inside your town, whereas all the stuff in the city was more gimmicky and didn't serve as much of a purpose. You could occasionally access Crazy Reds and visit Shampoodle to change your hair, but everything else was kinda whatever. There was a theater you could visit where players could learn expressions from Dr. Shrunk, you could visit the auction house to like sell items via Wi-Fi, which I never did, so it was basically useless. Gracie runs a shop that sells ridiculously expensive furniture and clothes clothes that you could literally never afford ever because she's a fucking bitch. You could visit the Happy Room Academy and finally tell them to fuck off directly to their faces. I don't care about the points. Stop sending me letters in the fucking mail. You could visit Katrina and get a fortune, which is whatever. Kicks can shine your shoes, which automatically changes their color to match your hair or clothing. You could visit the Reset Surveillance Center to unlock the silver shovel, and that's about it. There's like some dude who sells balloons, like, I don't know. It's cool, I guess. To be fair, it was an interesting concept, and maybe it was just poorly executed. But for me personally, I don't play Animal Crossing to go to the city. It's just not the vibe I'm looking for. When I play Animal Crossing, I want to walk around the forest, want to talk to animals, fish by the lake, walk on the beach. That's why I love Animal Crossing. It's the complete antithesis to the chaotic world we all live in. Meanwhile, city folks just like, yeah, fuck that. Let's go to the city. Loud as fuck, annoying ass fucking people, cars honking and screaming, like, get out of the fucking road. Like, I don't want that. I don't want to go to the fucking city. Now, the city is more of a personal complaint that I don't like, but if we want to talk about the actual worst aspect of city folk, it's by far the grass deterioration. Essentially, the game would track the player's movements throughout their town, and depending on how often they walked over the ground, the grass would start to deteriorate and form a path. And as a concept, it's really neat. But the issue is that if you play the game for hours on end and walk all over town, then all the grass in your town just gets destroyed and there's basically nothing you can do about it. It becomes such a problem that the lack of grass can cause certain insects to not even spawn in your town. Like, what a fucking terrible concept. Also, on a more random note, some copies of Animal Crossing City Folk came bundled with We Speak, which I honestly thought was something that they announced and never released, but apparently it did actually come out. It was basically a live microphone which acts similar to the Xbox One Kinect, where everyone in the room can just shout out their favorite racist slurs all at the same time while Kanye West's Power is on full blast and a baby is crying in the background and the mic just picks up everything all at once. Now, for me personally, I never had any desire to use this thing because I never trusted anyone online to go inside of my Animal Crossing town ever. I invest way too much time into this game for some dipshit to run over all my hybrid flowers and cut down all my trees, and then on top of that, have some stupid kid pop up in the We Speak just like, wow, you have oranges in your town, what are you, fucking gay? Oh my god, you have pink hybrid flowers, you're fucking gay, this town's gay. Like, why would anyone want that? One of the main reasons why I love playing video games is because I don't want to fucking talk to people. I will speed run my way to turning off voice chat in the settings of every video game I play. Like, do you think I play Animal Crossing to have human connections? No, of course not. I'm friends with a fucking bird. I want to fish by a river by myself and plant flowers, and I want to dig up a gyroid and put it in my house and make it do fart noises, okay? That's what I want to do, all right? I'm having fun by myself, thank you very much. Now, I'll take some screenshots and show off my town on social media, but don't fucking come. I don't want you here. This is my fucking town. Oh, you trying to sneak in here and steal all my fossils? Oh, you trying to talk to all my cool-ass villagers to bring them over to your little shithole town with pears? Yeah, no thanks, buddy. Get the fuck out of here. Anyways, City Folk was just whatever. I didn't really play it that much because I kind of just got bored of it, but it's still pretty good because it's just the same game as Wild World with some new stuff. So when Nintendo released the trailer for Animal Crossing New Leaf, it was hype as fuck. The human characters actually had normal proportions with actual legs. There was like lampposts and benches placed throughout the town, but most importantly, you could swim in the ocean. Oh my god, you can swim! No other game has ever done this before. It was the fucking hype as shit. New Leaf came out in 2012 on the 3DS, and the new concept was that your character was the mayor of the town, which was a fantastic premise considering the fact that in every Animal Crossing game, you were the only one who ever did anything. With your new position of power, you can issue town ordinances to enact laws which passively affect your town, and you can also commission public work projects to build amenities with the help of your new assistant Isabelle. You can build functional things like bridges, fences, streetlights, flower beds, and benches, but you can also build decorative features like fountains, wells, and public art. You can also build buildings like the cafe, a campsite, the Reset Surveillance Center, and the police station from the original Animal Crossing game. The rest of the buildings in the game are accessed at Main Street, which is New Leaf's version of the city. Timmy and Tommy run their own store this time, with Tom Nook being demoted to just selling house upgrades. The post office makes a return from the original game where you can send letters and items to other villagers or players. Able sisters once again sell clothes as well as pants and shoes now that playable characters are actual human beings. And Label left that bitch Gracie and is now selling accessories in the room next door. The museum is also back as usual, with the addition of deep sea catches you can find by swimming in the ocean by using a wetsuit, as well as a museum shop on the second floor where you can purchase some silver tools and create your own personal exhibits. Now, what I love about Main Street is that it nails the fucking vibes. It's the perfect example of a small town shopping area, it melds seamlessly with your town, and it fits the aesthetics of Animal Crossing that I personally love. It's fucking beautiful. Another great thing about Main Street is that as you play through the game, it continues to develop and evolve. Kix from City Folk will eventually establish his own store next to the Able Sisters. Shampoodle will move into the second floor. There's a new gardening store run by Leaf where you can buy flowers, saplings, and shrubs. Club Lul replaces the Roost in the theater as an entertainment venue where KK Slider performs on Saturday nights. The Fortune Shop is just the Fortune Shop again, and you can unlock the Dream Suite, which allows you to visit other players' towns that were uploaded to the internet. There's also the Happy Home Showcase where you can view houses of other players you've street passed, and you can also special order their furniture in their house. But for the most part, it's just an ugly gate that Digby awkwardly stands by 24/7, and I kinda fucking hate it because it's so transparently artificial. Like, this dude does not fucking move ever. He's such an NPC video game character, like he's a fucking alien. There's also a new store located in town called Retail, which is run by Reese and Cyrus. You can resell items to them at a higher price than Timmy and Tommy's store, and their other main service is being able to customize furniture for your home. Basically, this was the main place you would go to sell items to make money, which I found a little disappointing because frankly, I like Timmy and Tommy more, and these guys are just kinda whatever. The island also makes a return from the first game in the series, where the previous town mayor Tortimer runs an entire shop where you can participate in multiplayer minigames. The main benefit of traveling to the island was being able to catch all the rare fish and bugs which only appeared in the summer and reselling them for a massive profit. In fact, this new strategy for grinding for bells was mainly one of the biggest reasons why I stopped playing. With the new addition of all the public work projects, the sum cost to build up your town with bridges, shops, and other amenities became extremely expensive. And since it takes a day to build each project, I felt like I was more pressured to grind out money to meet these day-by-day requirements as soon as possible. As I continued playing, I eventually got exhausted from catching fish and bugs to farm money to meet the project deadlines that eventually just dropped the game altogether, which is a shame because I feel like I missed out on a lot of cool stuff. Another issue with the public work projects is that this new gameplay mechanic also came with many limitations. For example, despite having complete control over the public work projects to build your town, villagers will still randomly set up their homes in any of the predetermined spots which you have no control over, meaning that most of the time you would plan out the perfect layout for your town only for some dipshit frog villager to move in directly in front of your newly built bridge and ruin everything. Now, if you were a dictator, you would be able to just tell them to fuck off and demolish their house and let them be homeless, but New Leaf doesn't let you do that. So most players ended up taking the more psychotic approach of just relentlessly bullying their villagers in the hopes that they would eventually leave town on their own, which is about as equally fucked up, if not more. Still, despite this, New Leaf was basically another fantastic sequel and was exactly what I hoped for. It was fucking awesome. In fact, New Leaf was so awesome that the hype for the next game in the series was unreal, especially since most people were anticipating that the series would finally be back on console. The wait for the next game was also incredibly painful because Nintendo spent a ton of time messing around and releasing a bunch of Animal Crossing spin-offs that I personally did not care about. Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer was released in 2015 as a sort of interior design game through the Animal Crossing universe, which honestly seemed kinda boring to me. They also released Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival the same year, which I think was like a shitty Animal Crossing Mario Party game that no one wanted. But fully knowing this, Nintendo decided to exclusively package the game with the Isabelle Amiibo so all the obsessive Animal Crossing fans would still buy it despite the game sucking dick. But then Nintendo was like, fuck it, we need even more money. So then they also included another amiibo of the shittiest character in Animal Crossing alongside the bundle to jack up the price even more. Like, what a bunch of assholes. They also made a mobile game called Animal Crossing Pocket Camp in 2017 where players designed a campsite, and apparently some people liked it, but I never played it because, you know, it's a fucking mobile game. Anyways, Nintendo eventually got their shit together and announced Animal Crossing New Horizons at E3 2019, and the hype for this game was unreal. The game looked beautiful, it took place on a remote island, they showed off a ton of new mechanics like material gathering, an entire crafting system, finally being able to place furniture outside your home, path building, 8-player multiplayer, you could pick up trees with a shovel, and most importantly of all, you could get a stick and jump over the river. Holy shit, game of the fucking year. You ever see a game where you can pole vault across a river? I don't think so. No other game has ever done this before. Anyways, New Horizons was eventually released in 2020 on the Nintendo Switch during the peak of the global COVID-19 stay-at-home orders, and frankly, they couldn't have timed the release of this game better. At a time where everyone was depressed and miserable, stuck inside their homes, everyone was looking for an outlet to distract themselves, and Animal Crossing New Horizons was the perfect game to play. Because of this, it sold over 32 million copies, broke every single record imaginable, and cemented Animal Crossing as one of the most popular Nintendo series ever, on par with Mario and Zelda. Animal Crossing New Horizons was a fucking burst of happiness in an otherwise disgusting, bleak world where a life-threatening pandemic was constantly threatening everyone's lives, while also being artificially perpetuated by anti-masker morons who made it last literally like 2 fucking years longer than it need to, because God forbid they can't wear a little flimsy piece of fabric on their faces, bunch of fucking pussies. In fact, my only moments of true happiness during the COVID-19 pandemic was staying at home playing Animal Crossing New Horizons and watching all these anti-masker conservative dumb fucks claim that the virus was fake on social media and that masks did nothing, and then going out and getting COVID and then fucking dying a week later, and it was hilarious every time it happened, and I don't care. Fuck them, fuck their stupid friends, fuck their inbred, neurodivergent, retarded ass families. The only downside to the pandemic finally starting to end is that more of these dumb fucks will no longer die in the most embarrassing way possible. Animal Crossing New Horizons was the only good thing that happened, everything else sucked dick. So with all of that out of the way, New Horizons was a pretty good game, but it wasn't nearly as good of a sequel as Wild World and New Leaf were. You see, while New Horizons added tons of new features, it also had a lot less content from the previous games and was outright missing a lot of the core features the series was known for. The game was missing a lot of shops, there was no main street shopping area equivalent, Crazy Red wasn't even in the game at launch, Tom Nook's store only had like 1 upgrade, the cafe was just gone, gyroids were non-existent, the game had notably less interactions with villagers, a lot of the fruit trees added in New Leaf were missing. There's just a lot of missing features that didn't carry over to this game. Now, to make up for this lack of content, New Horizons has brought entirely new mechanics to the table instead, most notably the new crafting system. This time around, players can gather materials from the environment and use them to create tools, furniture, wallpaper, clothes, accessories, you name it. What I love about the crafting system is that it sort of gamifies the Animal Crossing experience a bit and gives players more things to work towards that doesn't involve grinding for bells. It also has the added bonus of providing an alternate way of decorating and improving your town, which is a major improvement over New Leaf's reliance on having massively expensive public work projects. In fact, most of the public work projects from New Leaf have an equivalent in New Horizons that's much easier to obtain by either having a crafting recipe or by obtaining them through an alternate form of currency known as Nook Miles. And no, it's not pronounced Nook Miles, it's pronounced Nuke Miles, okay? Shut up. I'm right and you're wrong. The way you obtain Nook Miles is by participating in daily activities and completing various achievements as you play through the game, which again gave players more things to do on a daily basis. All these new mechanics are propped up through Tom Nook's latest scam, Akka, the Nook Inc. Getaway Package. Initially, Tom Nook sells the player on the idea of a deserted island vacation getaway, but as time progresses, you slowly start developing the island to attract new villagers and eventually transition the island into a full-blown tourist destination, where the finale of the story involves getting KK Slider to visit the town to play a concert. This entire experience from start to finish is one of the only moments in the entire series where the game's credits actually felt like the ending to a game. And despite not playing it for very long after, it still gave New Horizons a sense of closure that I really appreciated. Showing up to a shitty island with absolutely nothing and turning it into a full-blown town was incredibly rewarding. And if anything, all of New Horizons' gameplay mechanics work together to strengthen this initial experience of completing the main story. In fact, the truly massive improvement to New Horizons in comparison to New Leaf is the amount of freedom players have when building and developing their towns. Right from the start, players have complete control to choose the location of every single building and infrastructure project down to the exact tile, and almost all the problems from New Leaf are essentially gone. In fact, once KK Slider shows up to your town, you also unlock the Island Designer application in your Nuke phone, which allows you to adjust the exact layout of your town to your heart's content. Players can create ponds, they can create cliff sides to adjust the verticality of their town, they can add waterfalls, they can adjust the paths of the rivers, they can create pathways between buildings, and you can essentially change every single aspect of your town right down to a single tile. So with all that said, Animal Crossing New Horizons was very good. It's a very solid experience that I personally really love, and I could recommend it to just about anyone. But as an Animal Crossing fan, there's still a lot of issues with this game that didn't make it the slam dunk it should have been. One notable problem with the game for me personally is that the tutorial lasts way too long. Ideally, the tutorials for Animal Crossing games should take maybe an hour or so to explain all the features, tutorialize some of the mechanics, and then throw you into the start of the game proper so you can start paying off your home loan on day one. But New Horizons stretches this experience out for so long that by the end of day one, you have less features than you would if you were playing the original Animal Crossing. You don't have Tom Nook's store, you don't have the museum, you don't have a house, you can't even walk across the entire island, you don't even have the complete soundtrack, you don't have hourly music. The entire game is just stuck on one song that constantly loops over itself for a fucking week straight. It's so ridiculous. On top of that, they also had the bright idea of giving all the tools durability, which is a huge pain in the ass in this game. Now, item durability has sort of become this really obnoxious conversation to have with people because it inevitably revolves around discussing it with irrational people who just outright hate it, regardless of how it actually affects the game, which is kind of annoying. Breath of the Wild is a perfect example. Everyone loses their minds over the durability of weapons in this game, but at the end of the day, it doesn't negatively affect the combat system in a substantial way. Whether or not you have a sword or a spear or a two-hander weapon or a bow or a boomerang or an elemental weapon, they all serve the exact same function of killing monsters. And the combat system is always fun regardless of how good or bad your weapons are, and you also have runes and other means of killing monsters even when you have nothing. In contrast, tool durability in New Horizons is more frustrating in this case, because each tool in the game has a very hyper-specific function that the other tools cannot serve. For example, if you're trying to catch bugs in New Horizons and your net ends up breaking, then you can no longer catch bugs and you have to get a new one. There is no other option. So as a result, you end up in this really obnoxious situation where you have to counter this system by essentially crafting a shit ton of tools and storing them in your house. And then when you want to do some fishing, you have to go out with like 4 fishing rods in your inventory and preemptively prepare for them all to break. It's just not a very fun solution. You see, unlike all the other activities in Animal Crossing that are enjoyable wastes of time, having to gather materials and craft 20 backup sets for all of your tools is a miserable waste of time. To top it all off, if there was any game in the series where the gold variants of the tools should all have infinite durability, it should have been New Horizons, but it doesn't. The gold tools still end up breaking. Like, what the fuck? Why even make them? And it's not like this is something they missed or didn't think of. Like, this is precedent from like the original Animal Crossing game. The axe in the previous games always had durability and the golden axe didn't. That was the benefit of having the golden axe. So why don't they have it in this game? Another issue I have with the game is that the DIY crafting system also created some unintended consequences with the way you obtained furniture. Essentially, you can either purchase furniture from Tom Nook's store with bells, or you can obtain a DIY recipe for free, but then have to create the furniture by gathering resources. It's a very good concept that I think is brilliant, but the main issue is that the only way to obtain the DIY recipes is by randomly obtaining them from villagers or by finding a message in a bottle. Initially, before the game was released, I thought Tom Nook would be selling random DIY recipes in his store alongside the furniture, but this sadly wasn't the case. As a result, roughly half of the furniture in the entire game isn't even available in Tom Nook's store. Entering the store on a brand new day and having all the furniture end up being duplicates of items you already have was an everyday occurrence. And it also didn't help that it was entirely possible for the game to give you duplicates of DIY recipes which you already have. This isn't even addressing the issue that some furniture through the DIY recipes can also be absurdly difficult to craft due to the rarity of the materials. So when you do finally find some really cool DIY recipe, you usually end up never making it, which is by far the worst possible outcome. Also, did anyone else find it needlessly cruel and unusual that you unlock the landscaping tool after you obtain a 3-star town when all of your buildings and bridges are already in place? Like, why the fuck would they do it like that? With the system as it is, you can't even remodel your town once you unlock it because now you have to move all your buildings and demolish all the bridges and ramps in order to even rebuild anything from the ground up. To make matters worse, it takes an entire day to move one building, and Tom Nook charges you fucking 50,000 bells per building. And then once you finally can afford it and move the fucking thing, you can finally terraform the area and do whatever you wanted to. And then you have to pay Tom Nook another 50,000 bells to place the building in the spot you actually wanted. So it actually takes 2 days and 100,000 bells per building. Like, what the fuck is this shit? And people say Tom Nook is a good guy. What a bunch of morons. Alright, Tom Nook has always been and always will be a greedy capitalist fucking asshole. Like, these dumb fucks will be like, oh man, he doesn't charge you interest on your home loans. He's actually really accommodating. Like, shut the fuck up, you fucking bootlicking peasants. I mean, did you guys even play New Horizons? This is the worst game to date. Tom Nook is back at it again. You spend all your time and energy in New Horizons developing Tom Nook's Island for his company, which you don't own or have any stake in order to get KK Slider to show up to generate more tourism and clout for Tom Nook's Island to generate more money for the town which you built by yourself with your own materials on the island you don't own exclusively for Tom Nook, while you are also paying off your mortgage loans for your house, which you still don't technically own, on the fucking deserted island vacation getaway that you fucking paid for. Like, you are the biggest cuck in this game. Like, why the hell do I have to pay bells to develop infrastructure for Tom Nook's Island? Like, bitch, it's your fucking island! Why don't you pay for it? You do all this shit for Tom Nook's Island and he still doesn't even pay you. He doesn't give you anything. It's fucking ridiculous. You water the flowers, you plant trees, you gather materials to build fences, pathways, critical infrastructure. You build the museum's entire exhibits from fucking nothing. You go out on island tours and colonize other islands to harvest their natural resources. You do free outreach for Nook Inc. to persuade other villagers to move to Tom Nook's Island and literally pay Tom Nook money to build the villagers' homes, who will still end up paying Tom Nook anyways. He's a fucking asshole, and if you think he's a nice guy, you're a fucking moron. You're being duped by a capitalist mastermind. You are a fucking cog in the machine of the Nook Inc. Corporation. You are helping Tom Nook develop and fund gay whore pedophile bathhouses on his private islands, and he's fucking raping Timmy and Tommy and all the kids, and the blood is on your hands. Wake the fuck up! What the hell was I even talking about? Oh yeah, New Horizons wasn't as good as New Leaf. You see, I feel like one of the biggest issues with the lack of content in New Horizons was this idea that Nintendo would update the game over time through software patches. By providing updates in this manner, it gave off the idea that despite the lack of content, it wouldn't be that big of a deal later in the year because Nintendo would finally get around to adding in all the old features and missing furniture sets and whatnot, but as we all know, that didn't happen. Ironically, in an attempt to drip feed content content over the course of a year to keep player engagement up, they launched the game with so little content that most players got bored before they could download the updates. And the updates themselves had such little content in comparison to how much stuff was originally missing that it didn't really matter. Anyways, despite all my complaints as an Animal Crossing fan, New Horizons was still a pretty good game overall. While it's not an absolute perfect sequel like Wild World and New Leaf were, it did achieve a lot for what it's worth and leaves a lot of room for the next game to build up on what it established, which is exciting. So for now, the future for Animal Crossing is bright. Every game in the series has continued to introduce new concepts and gameplay mechanics over the years, and even games like City Folk, which were somewhat lacking, were able to introduce new mechanics which were later improved on. There's clearly still room for improvement to make future games even better, and there's a lot of directions they can go in. So as someone who's played Animal Crossing for a very long time, here's what I would personally want. For starters, I feel like no other game in the series has ever matched the charm of the original Animal Crossing. I don't know if it's just the camera angle that perfected this feeling of seclusion, but the original games really nailed those vibes of wandering through nature, where I feel like the later games got lost a bit once they transitioned towards the massive town customization features. What I love about the original Animal Crossing is how understated the whole experience is, whereas New Horizons sort of makes the entire game feel like a sterile diorama that gets perfectly sculpted and then left untouched forever. It's like players take this innocent, perfect little world and then turn it into a fucking Walmart parking lot and install Japanese tea gardens with unrealistic waterfalls all over the place like it's fucking Disneyland. On the other hand, I do get that people really love these customization options, and I wouldn't say that they should get rid of them, but I just don't get as much out of it as everyone else does. Originally, the coolest aspect of the series was having towns being randomly generated with random villagers, but now that you can terraform everything from the ground up and personally recruit whatever villagers you want, it basically doesn't even matter. The amount of control players have over their towns is kind of ridiculous. In New Horizons, Animal Crossing players will literally create fascist apartheid systems where only cute cat villagers can live near the town square, and all the undesirable, ugly villagers get placed in the outskirts of town until they eventually get bullied into moving away, or a villager in a campsite will want to move in and then forcibly displace them from their home. I mean, it's gotten to the point that Animal Crossing players are essentially sex trafficking popular characters on the internet for payment in bells and rare items. Like, what the fuck is this shit? Now, sadly, I feel like we've sort of opened Pandora's box with New Horizons, because now that Animal Crossing fans have so much control over their towns, any future game that takes things away or limits them in some capacity is just going to suck. So with all that said, one solution that I would personally enjoy from a future Animal Crossing game is having the ability to travel to neighboring towns or a national forest or some other areas that can act as safe havens that can't be fucked with in order to preserve the original experience. Sort of like the island system, but on a much larger scale with permanent neighboring areas that are unique to your save file. It would be cool to see villagers in your town move over to a neighboring town. Maybe some of the neighboring areas could have different climates, which could open up the limited availability of certain insects and bugs for a longer period of time. Maybe other places could randomly specialize in certain aspects, like having more fossils spawn in the area. Or maybe it always snows because it's near a mountain peak or something. For the most part, I feel like improving on the player's ability to travel to other areas and expanding the world of Animal Crossing would give players more things to do on a daily basis and play to the strengths of the original game. Like, I'm personally fine with players having their personal towns getting mowed down and being transformed into Akihabara because apparently that's what people want, but as long as there's other places you can travel to outside of the fascist hellholes created by players, then I think that would be a good change that doesn't sacrifice the complete freedom and customization options that fans like. Anyways, with all of that said, the Animal Crossing series is awesome. I fucking love it. It's a goddamn classic. If you haven't played Animal Crossing, you probably should. It's really fun, it's charming as hell, it's very relaxing, the music is incredible, and most importantly, a lot of cute girls play Animal Crossing, okay? And if you want to date cute girls who play video games, you have to play Animal Crossing, all right? You have to play Animal Crossing, you have to play farming sims like Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley, and you have to play MapleStory. Either you're gonna play these on your own and then a cute girl's gonna date you, or you're either gonna date a cute girl and they'll force you to play these games. So you have no choice either way, so start playing these games and get a head start. It is what it is.